is the last for the day, and for the Africa Climate Week. Our next session is going to focus on building community resilience through wildlife conservancies. And we are going to begin by showing a short video, which is going to set the stage for the discussions. So we are going to hear from various ecosystems on how conservancies are building community resilience for climate change. Karibuni.
Climate change is taking a toll. Just recently we had a major drought. A few years back we had major floods. The seasons are shifting. We have more longer dry and severe dry periods, and livestock losses, sometimes up to 50, up to 70% in those landscapes where majority of Kenya pastoral communities lie. 80% of Kenya is pastoral areas. Generally with a low rainfall, quite a bit of seasonality in amount of rainfall that comes, and the pastoralists who live along wildlife are suffering the impacts of climate change with both the death of animals, the emergence of diseases that are killing both livestock and wildlife, and increased competition that is creating conflict between people and wildlife. The impacts of changing land uses as the growing population convert land to other land uses, for example, cultivation of land for food production, which is creating a barrier to animal movements and creating a transformation in habitat that wildlife are using to survive. In order to address this challenge, we have been, for the last 3 decades, creating a platform that focuses on locally led action using a concept we call the Conservancy. A Conservancy is basically a community institution which enables the community to organize themselves and make decisions to survive better in these varying environments. So the way the Conservancy works is that a legal entity is established and a governance structure around it, and mostly the Conservancy focuses on grazing management, where habitat destruction activities like charcoal burning, unsustainable harvesting of wood and grasses are prevented through a network of rangers. And cattle are also grazed in a planned way so that certain areas of the landscape are always left to recover during the times of the wet season, and grasses do respond when it rains. And if the land is being grazed every day, everywhere, then you have the degradation that we see in a lot of the environment. So in order to address this, the conservancies adopt grazing plans to manage the pastures much better, allow more grass to grow, reduce the bare ground, allow trees and herbs to grow, which therefore creates the ability of the land to sequester more carbon. Did you know that livestock and wildlife can actually benefit each other? Many times we think that, or rather we are told that livestock and wildlife are not compatible, but actually there is evidence that well-grazed landscapes are good for wildlife. In addition to that, we know that indeed the droughts will come. And so how will the conservancy community survive during this time? It is important that they diversify. The way to diversify is to look at what alternatives, land uses and enterprises that are compatible to both the livestock culture and wildlife conservation. One of them happened to be ecotourism. So to do this, the conservancies now adopt a tourism model directly linked with land conservation, where for every tourism bed, 350 acres in the case of the Mara is conserved. And the tourists who are arriving will pay a conservation fee, and this conservation fee is used about 60 to 70% to pay the leases, create a new income streams that goes directly to the households. The balance, the 30 to 40%, will go to operations of the conservancy. More recently, the conservancies are also looking at carbon credit as a new income source. The whole idea is to develop different varied income streams that will go to benefit the communities and to cushion them during these periods of drought, and therefore create a safety net that holds communities above the poverty line. Africa is meeting for the first time in Kenya for the African Climate Summit. A very rare and welcomed opportunity to think differently. National governments and those that have the power to contribute to supporting these efforts need to invest more, especially to support this well-tested model of community-led efforts such as conservancies, not just in Kenya, but in the whole of Africa. I think Kenya has demonstrated that conservancies do work with our network of 184 member conservancies covering nearly 9 million hectares of land. It is possible that Africa should strive to make a decision to create community-led institutions all over Africa that are focused on better land management. And I'm glad that one of the themes of the Africa Climate Summit is better land management. And really that is the crux of the matter. I mean, there will be rains, and we are expecting that some El Nino rains are maybe expected soon or in the near future. But a lot of water comes and goes to waste because there is not enough investment in water management, in capture of the surface runoff through dams. So we need to think about how to best invest in water collection, water management, so that the amount of rainfall that we receive is spread over the year. We also need to think about supporting enterprise. How can we create these income stream models that support local communities? That will be a game changer so that pastoralists are not entirely dependent on the masses of rainfall, that actually there are some land uses that are not rain-fed dependent that actually can create an alternative income streams so that these communities are driven to a path away from relief food.
Good evening. I think this is the last session for both the Africa Climate Summit and the Africa Climate Week. We are at the tail end. I also understand, I think the closing ceremony could be happening, but I think this is an important topic that we are going to discuss. So the stage has been set. I have my panelists. I'll ask them to come to the stage, please. So, karibuni sana, and I'm sure you can recognize Dickson Kaelo is part of the panelists. I think he set for us a very good stage for what we are going to discuss today. Thank you so much, Dickson. And the topic for today's event is building community resilience through wildlife conservancies. My name is Munira Bashir, and I'll be the moderator for this session. I work with the Nature Conservancy, and our work in Kenya is mostly community-led, supporting communities alongside other partners for complementarity to avoid duplication. Just a few highlights before I get to have my panelists introduced. Communities, and we know, are custodians and the stewards of the resources, of the natural resources. And what we should emphasize, and I think what we have had throughout this summit, is that for design development of either investments, any type of investments within communities must be communities must be involved, while also appreciating the indigenous knowledge. Indigenous knowledge from communities is very important because they've been living with these natural resources from time immemorial. So we should not avoid, getting communities on the table to decide how projects will be designed. Projects with communities we've had throughout the summit and the Africa Climate Week must return value to them for social development. Creation of high-value jobs and continued ability to deal with climate challenges. So today, we are going to hear from the various ecosystems within Kenya how conservancies are building community resilience and how they're tackling climate issues to bring benefits to the communities that so live with natural resources. I have a panel of 4. You've heard from Dickson, the CEO of Kenya Wildlife Conservancies Association. I think he talked about Kenya Wildlife Conservancies Association, which is a national forum that brings together all the conservancies, wildlife conservancies in Kenya, including private conservancies and community conservancies. So I'll start from our right. If you could quickly please introduce yourself and which ecosystem you're coming from.
Thank you, Munira. My name is Alfred Mwanake. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Taita Taveta Wildlife Conservancies Association. We are based in the Savo ecosystem.
Thank you. Muli?
My name is Daniel Muli. I work for Maasai Mara Wildlife Conservancies Association as a senior program officer in charge of governance.
Good evening. My name is Beatrice Lempaira. I work as the Gender and Social Inclusion Lead for the Northern Rangelands Trust. We work with community conservancies in the north and the coast of Kenya.
Good evening. Dickson Kaelo. I'm the CEO of Kenya Wildlife Conservancies Association, KWCA.
Thank you, Dickson. Thank you, my panelists. I think we all heard from Dickson what a conservancy is. We also heard what the role of conservancies in promoting climate adaptation and mitigation. We also heard from the video how Kenya Wildlife Conservancies Association works to strengthen the capacity of regional associations to support conservancies in climate action. So I'm going to begin with you, William. And William comes from the Maasai Mara Wildlife Conservancies Association, one of the mature associations in Kenya. If you could just briefly talk to us about how grazing plans and incomes through land leasing have supported communities, and what else is happening in the Mara to build the capacity of communities.
Thank you very much. Coming from the Mara, as I've said, that the Mara Conservancies is now a land, it was community land which has been subdivided. It is now all of it private land, where all the landowners own their land privately, but they have come together in the form of the conservancies, as it was introduced earlier before, to form conservancies. This model of conservancies has really helped the Mara community or the landowners of the Mara, in the sense that coming together, they provide land which is enough for their pastoral way of life. This is pastoralism for the case of livestock grazing. So what happens is that land is leased through a partnership of tourism partners and landowners, and these leases go for 15 to 25 years, and the landowners will now get an extra revenue on top of their livestock in that particular land. So what happens is that lands becomes available, because after land is subdivided, you have the absolute ownership, the absolute power to do whatever you want on your land. No one can dictate on what you are going to do on your land. So coming together as a conservancy, because of wildlife conservation, this has brought all these landowners together, and they provide this land available for wildlife and also tourism and livestock. So in so doing, we have a grazing arrangement where we have some grazing plants. Certain areas of the conservancies, you have access for your livestock within an arrangement where the landowners and the management of the conservancy have the responsibility to plan for grazing within this particular land. So cattle will be moving on a rotational basis from one grazing block to another. So in so doing, it's a concept of an indigenous knowledge where the Maasai used to have grass banks, which they keep so that they have their livestock to graze during the drought season. And it's the same case that is applying in the Mara. In so doing also, they don't graze in an area until it becomes overgrazed. So they move from one place to another. At a certain level, the grass cover has to be maintained, and they leave also something for wildlife, so they don't finish everything. So regeneration will take precedence after the livestock take over, and then now the vegetation will have some very good cover. They become it's a good act for carbon sink, and in so doing, they will absorb and store some carbon dioxide, significant amount, that will absorb a lot of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So the grazing plan has really helped in that sense. And traditionally, the Maasai is used to cut trees. They cut the shrubs so that they fence off their cows during the night. It is no longer happening now. So they have provided an alternative where they have mobile bombers, which are also predator-proof because they coexist together with wild animal. So these predator-proof bombers and mobile bombers, in that sense as well, they will move from place to place with that, so they don't cut. In this community as well, they don't practice now charcoal burning, because even with the lease agreements that they have a clause that you don't cut down the trees, you don't do cattle burning. So that one really assists a lot in terms of mitigating in the climate change. Because of these areas, as it was said earlier by our CEO, that we don't have enough rainfalls. So one of the things that we do is to provide water. We have to provide some small dams so that when these animals or the livestock are moving from place to place, they have water in every block, so that you don't have degradation taking place where water is only common in one particular place. Those are one of the hindrances that affect grazing plants in the conservancy. Even the levels of training the herders in those particular conservancies, so that they understand the concept. In so doing as well, we have some very good governance in the conservancies, where the entities that leases the land are led by the landowners, and they are owned by the landowners, or a combination of landowners and tourism partners, because this is a partnership between the landowners and the tourism partners. And these landowners are well trained so that they have that ability to make some good decisions on their land. So I want to say that governance is also very key, and especially now to enforce this grazing, the landowners must be well informed. They are the people who do this. So we have elected representatives from the landowners, and they have grazing committees from each and every village who are responsible together with the management to decide on where to graze in each and every day. So in case of any problems, they have to form their own bylaws, regulations that govern the grazing plans in that particular conservancy. So they have the do's and don'ts, and they adhere into them because of the governance practices practiced in the conservancies. So the leasing aspect has really been very much beneficial to the conservancies, because leasing land has really proven to protect this community land. If it was not for these lease agreements in the Mara, this land could have already changed hand to people from outside. And without something that binds people together, there is no way that you can say the so-called local people or the indigenous people can remain the way they are. When land has changed the tenure to be private, somebody can do whatever they want on their land. But coming together is very key. So I can say, if it is not for the leasing that is taking place now in the Mara, the so-called community land could have all of it could have gone. It is even attested by some of the community land which was subdivided before the year 2000 or even 1990s, that land is no longer in the communities. It has changed hands to other people. So I can say conservancies is a way to go. in terms of climate change mitigation, or if we want to remain relevant as indigenous people, how do we come together as landowners after land has been subdivided? Because I know for sure most of the Kenyan land now has been subdivided. It is now private. We are no longer in the community land, most of us, especially in the Mara. So if you want to understand that kind of a concept, it's only unity of purpose to come together, and then we agree into that. I want to put it very clear that in the conservancies, landowners agree together, and there is a concept that we want to form a conservancy. It is not something that anyone is being forced to join a conservancy. No, it is something that will come out of your will, and no one will ever force you to bring your title or sign your title into a conservancy without your consent. I can say a free, prior, informed consent is always there before a conservancy is formed. So it is something that it comes out of the will of the landowners. Neither are the people in the conservancies are evicted out of their own land. No, it is a process that we agree, and you also benefit as the other landowner. So it is something of mutual benefit and mutual agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you very much. And Daniel was basically talking about good governance and management of conservancies, and how conservancies are coming together to manage a piece of land that they communally own. And one important thing he said is that in the Mara, I think leases were at the beginning 5 years, but now they're at 25. And this is communities themselves saying, we want to move from 5 years to 25 lease with the investors, because I think they're seeing the benefits that they're getting from that. I'll move now to my second panelist, the only lady in the panelists, Beatrice Lempaira. And she's going to talk to us about complementary livelihoods within community conservancies. Karibu.
Thank you, Madam Munira. I'll just recap a little about the experience of Northern Kenya. Unlike the Mara and the South, we have communally owned spaces, so we have the community lands. And also within the landscape that the Northern Rangelands Trust operates in, we work with different and over 19 indigenous communities. And just to really stress the importance of and the recognition that community conservancies are not necessarily something separate from what the indigenous communities are doing. It's more of a recognition that the indigenous people's way of life is linked to the natural resources that we have, and community conservancies bring that additional dynamic to provide opportunities and alternatives to ways of communities really mitigating and adapting to climate change. I'll now speak briefly about alternative livelihoods, and this is more about my own experience working with Beadworks Kenya, which is a social enterprise that works with women in Northern Kenya. And also just to mention that with climate change, life is changing very fast. And while we continue to dialogue globally, regionally about climate change, there's also the lived experience of the people on the ground. And as most of us can experience and can attest, there was milk throughout. Now there's no milk, there's drought, livestock have moved. And so what happens to those people who live in those landscapes? And the most affected, as we can all attest to, is the women and the young children. And so when we speak about complementary livelihoods, is really looking at what is compatible to the pastoralism or to the indigenous people's lives there, but that looks at and addresses the well-being. And Beadworks is one of the enterprises that we've piloted and tested in Northern Kenya. We work with 1,200 women for the last 8 years, and really just looking at them producing beaded products for local and international market, more and reaching out to the women where they are. It's not really a factory setup. We reach out where they are so that they make the product, and it's aggregated at the village level and then consolidated and then presented to the market. This does two things. One, it gives women additional income to be able to supplement their nutrition and additional resources for their families, and also just support their entire livelihood. When the Morans, the men are out there grazing, they can provide food. They can ensure the children have income. The same thing is also happening with other groups in Taita Taveta. We have groups that are doing basketry, but it's more of how do we ensure that they can make extra income, but also live within their way of life. And so the essence is, instead of complicating the life, what works? And every landscape is different. And the additional aspect to it is, with every sale for beadwax, for example, there's a percentage that goes to the Conservancy to continue supporting the conservation work. Because at the end of the day, we believe that livelihoods, the environment, the natural resources that we have is important. But more so, having a balance between the people and the wildlife and the land health is important. The other aspect of beadwax and the enterprises that we work with women, it gives women an organized structure that enables them to come together, not only dialogue about business and other issues, but gives them a voice, a structured way to be able to champion being in leadership positions. We've seen women moving from leading a beadwax group to being, wanting to be in the conservancy boards. And this gives them the opportunity then to be meaningfully engaged and also voice and give voice to what they see as important in a conservancy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. I think Beatrice has brought the issue of how women come together, not just for nature, but also to discuss social elements within their communities. I will now move to Tsavo ecosystem, where we'll have Alfred speak to carbon credits. I think within the Tsavo ecosystem, the first, I think, ever carbon project that we saw was in this ecosystem. Karibu sana, Alfred.
Thank you. So in the Tsavo ecosystem, we have, as Taita Taveta Wildlife Conservancies Association, 33 members. Out of these 33 members, 15 of them are under the Kasigao Red Plus project. This is a project which began in 2010, but maybe I'll just talk about before 2010 what was happening. And before 2010, what was taking place on the ground was a lot of our woodlands were shrinking because there was no many options for the community in terms of improving their livelihoods. So they would engage in a lot of charcoal burning and logging. So we found that the area, our landscape was quickly degrading, but because of the intervention of the Kasigao Red Plus project, which came in to help in terms of mitigation of greenhouse gases, the community in Taita Taveta found themselves in a position where they could play their role in terms of addressing the issues around global warming and being also in a good position to be able to earn some income while playing that role. We find that over the 10 years of the project that the communities have been making some revenues. Over the last 5 years, the community have made $10.7 million US. So this is of an area of 500,000 acres. And just to give you even more highlights would be that from the 500,000 acres when the baseline was initially done, we find that we had 500,000 tons of carbon, but that has gradually grown, and currently we find that we have 1.7 million tons that are now being synced annually within those 500,000 acres. Now, the project has come in to really create resilience within the community. We know that during 2020, we were faced with the COVID-19 pandemic. So most conservancies were actually not able to run the operations, but these 15 member conservancies that were under that are under the Kasigao Red Plus project were actually able to continue running with their operations because they continued to earn revenue from the project. These revenues, it has provided jobs for communities. We find that already over 5,500 households are supported directly by this project. But apart from that, we find that within the conservancies, we've got over 600 jobs which have been created directly from the Kasigao Red Plus project. Apart from that, we find that now our communities have been able to actually really look into diversifying their revenue streams by actually being able to now invest in other enterprises such as ecotourism. We have some of our member conservancies within that project that have actually used their own funds from the carbon projects to actually establish really good-looking ecotourism facilities, which now help them to attract income through tourism. Apart from that, they've been able to get to be able to improve their road infrastructure, their water infrastructure. So even at the backdrop of coming from a 3-year drought spell, we find that the community have actually been able to invest in earth dams and invest in boreholes, which have supported them to continue to provide water for their livestock. But apart from the livestock, also wildlife, which has been affected by drought due to the challenges of climate change. So the project is very important in terms of how communities can actually realize a livelihood from their natural resources, and also give them the opportunity to be able to actually use these incomes to benefit them at a household level, and also catalyze other investments that will be important to ensure that the conservancies continue to sustain their operations, and the conservancies can continue being a meaningful option for communities who have decided to move that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alfred. And Alfred, I think what he talked about is an important subject. We saw this being one of the focus areas during the Africa Climate Summit. Coming closer home to Kenya, we had a Climate Act, and we reviewed that to include carbon markets, just showing that carbon is gaining momentum in Africa, and we just need to put frameworks in place so that it's a win-win for both the investor, for both the government, and for both the communities. Dickson, I know you set the stage in your video. I'll give you 2 minutes. If there's anything that didn't come out or something that we need to highlight, and then we'll go to questions and answers. Karibu, Dickson.
Thank you very much, Munira. Really just to add that all week here at the summit, we've heard how Africa is the least emitter and yet the most impacted, and how our rural communities, particularly those that rely on rain-fed natural resource use, including cultivation and agriculture, are the most vulnerable. And really we've been told repeatedly around how best communities must by themselves begin to create their own methods of adapting to these massive changes brought about by climate change. It's also notable, just listening through the sessions, through the exhibition, how this again is a little bit of a paradox, that while Africa is supposed to be concentrating on adaptation, increasingly in most of the sessions, you see that a lot of the discussion is around climate change mitigation, where the continent really contribute very little. These suggestions that have been shared by my colleagues are just examples of how communities can organize themselves instead of waiting for some future situation where some international funding opportunity will bring in resources. How can the communities themselves organize themselves, create institutions that can support their communities from surviving? And we've seen examples of how these conservancies are the grass banks, how they maintain the traditional systems of land management and grazing, and how they therefore being able to manage better livestock, create better livestock value chain, more income, more milk, and beyond that, beginning to diversify into opportunities in tourism, in carbon, in biodiversity credits, in social enterprise, and how that innovation in our country has transformed the lives of quite a number of our growing communities. We do currently have, these are just 3 of our 12 regions. We have about 12 regions. We, as an organization, work to build their capacity, and the whole goal is to create a focus on land management, so that even when there is a drought, the landowners will be taking stock and taking action to survive. And when there are wet season, because we also do get wet season, and we've seen in places where pastures are being managed better, livestock surviving in the drought. I worked for 12 years in the Mara, where Daniel came from, and prior to establishment of conservancies, there were always movement to other places to seek for pastures. But since the conservancy were established, more pastoralists are actually moving into the conservancies to access pasture. And also, more importantly, creating these institutions so that their voice can be heard. They can influence policy. We've had a situation where in our country during COVID, for example, we were able to go to government, and government paid salaries for all the 4,000 rangers in conservancies all through the COVID period. And right now we have a budgetary allocation to develop road and water infrastructure in the communities, recently announced by the Cabinet Secretary for Tourism and the Principal Secretary. Nearly 4 million Kenyan shillings are being invested just this year to support infrastructure development and water improvement in conservancies, and really just attest to the point that being organized and creating institutions that can leverage the voice is really what is the solution to surviving climate change. Daniel did mention that in the Mara they do have leases, and these leases are generating just from about 40 tourism facilities in excess of $7 million US dollars going directly to 14,000 households. Not a lot, but in addition to their livelihood and income from livestock, these become an alternative, an additional source, diversifying those livelihoods. And if they are supported, they can create opportunities to sustain communities during these shocking periods of droughts and floods.
Thank you, Thank you, Dickson. Clap for Dickson. I think just to recap and say that I think there's a great opportunity for wildlife conservancies in this country. I think we've seen government from the highest office on the land allocating money for infrastructure development and water within conservancies for people and wildlife. So I think we have a great opportunity to really build on what my colleagues have shared here today. There are opportunities, and I think if we come together, what we hear from government is whole government, whole society. What does that mean? Let's ponder on that, but for me, what I think is bringing us all together for complementarity and not duplication, for the better for nature and people. I know we started a bit late, but I'll now move to the audience, and we'll take 3 questions. And if you stand to ask a question, please direct it to either Alfred if it was on carbon, Daniel if it was about leases, Beatrice on complementary livelihoods, and Dickson, I think you can ask him anything on conservancies. So questions, I think there's one there. 2, 3. Oh, okay. So we'll start with
Thank you so much. My name is Monica Yator. I am the founder of Indigenous Women and Girls Initiative. I am so interested with the carbon. I come from Baringo, and there's so many conflicts around natural resources base. You have heard Baringo so many times. So I would like to know how best can you support grassroots organization to support pastoralists in that area, because we are fighting because we want food. So how do we bring in carbon credit and the rest so that our communities can enhance their livelihood, so that we stop now fighting and being in the news every day? Thank you.
Okay, I think there was a question here. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Francis Makabwa from Kenyan. I heard you talk about complementarity and mutual coexistence, and you talked of detector homes, where you used to use trees to maybe form a boundary around your homes, but now you are having what you are calling detector homes, and there's no conflict. So I just wanted to understand the nature. What nature does this home take that wild animals cannot cause damage to you without necessarily having any boundary around you?
Thank you for that question. There was a third one, and then I'll move there. There was, yeah. Were you the third? There was a third one there, then the fourth one. Take the fourth one. Yeah.
Hello. My name is Boaz Ogada, and I'm a co-founder at the Africa Climate Resilience Foundation, which is a youth-led organization. Basically what we do, we are a research-based organization. We bridge the gap between integration of indigenous knowledge and modern science or contemporary science. So we work closely with youth-led organizations, some of them represented in NRT, Northland Rangeland Trust, and Kenya Wildlife Conservancies Association, who are represented in the panel. And I just want to say you are doing a great job, but what we are saying is we need more solutions and innovative ideas, all right? So mine is not a question per se, but an outcome to this event. So it will be what are the compensation plan for indigenous livelihoods that are being lost due to climate change? A case in point, you find that pastoral communities are losing their livestock due to droughts and all these climate hazards, right? And now we are talking about compensating these communities. You find this at their bread and butter. They use it to support even other programs like education and what have you. And looking at the global outlook, we have the issue of loss and damage finance. And talking of finances, we have a very serious gap on how do local communities get access to climate finance. So as an outcome to this event, can we come up with a solution where we are saying we need to compensate these communities? Which frameworks do we need to design as an outcome to this event? Because without taking this seriously, we will end up in continuous cycle of vulnerability, where we will end up even losing on loss and damage finance. So it's upon us now to drive the conversation. Let's come up with these innovative structures, and I will be happy to collaborate with anybody who can assist us so that we can help design this framework. It's now our time to drive this discussion. And without considering these critical issues, we will end up not realizing the future we want. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good recommendations. And I think the discussion, conversations don't end here with the closure of the Africa Climate Week. We continue sitting on the same table to come up with tools. And our CEO is going to talk, I think, to that, some of the innovative mechanisms we are using for livelihoods improvement. I don't see the gentleman. Oh, you removed your red jacket, so that's why I couldn't recognize you. Please give him the mic.
Oh, I'm William, and I'm a student of human resource management. So I had a question about the carbon credit. We are living in a realistic world. If we take an example like Kiambu, we are cutting down trees and removing farmland to investing in real estate, in creation of, and in building of structures that can finance or we can generate income. How can we motivate those people, those grannies? Because most of the people who land in Kiambu are grannies and our parents. How can we motivate them that the carbon credit is more profitable than these structures that they are building? How can we motivate these people on the ground? Because most of them don't access these television networks, they don't access these medias, but we need, or specifically we need to remove an innovative way we can access these people who own this land. If we can take a picture of Kiambu since 2012 to here now, there's a very big difference. It was a green county, but now we can't call it even a green. We can remove the word G and remain with the word green, because this is the realistic world. We can talk what I've been there for 20 years and I know what is the difference. You can't access small forests because they are cutting down more trees and there are many upcoming structures. What can we do about that?
Thank you very much. I think that's a great question, and it's all to do with the competing land users, incentives for conservation, and I think it's real now, and I think Dickson will talk to that. So I'll go back to, I think, the first question. You had two questions on carbon. Alfred, you want to take that?
Okay. You bring out a good question in terms of the issue around conflict, because there is opportunities, a lot of opportunities in Kenya, especially to develop carbon projects. But we find that in some areas where there is usually conflict, then a lot of support doesn't come in. And so it's important, and this highlights the importance of partners, donors, people coming together to invest resources, first and foremost to be able to stabilize landscapes. And a landscape like Baringo is important. It has got important biodiversity aspects, and it's important that we look at having partners now coming in. And the good thing is that already at a landscape level, there is the Baringo County Conservancies Association. So there's an opportunity that that association can be able to bring together all the landowners within Baringo, just like what we have from the landscape that I come from. The organization that I work for is Taita Taveta Wildlife Conservancies Association. But before the association came to life, there was conflict in terms of illegal herders coming into those landscapes and degrading the areas through overgrazing and depleting pastures, which would also increase the human-wildlife conflict, because once the wildlife do not have enough grazing areas or enough pastures to graze, they would move into the community farms. So an important opportunity is then how partners, like even the Nature Conservancy, come in to support the area around Baringo, support BCCA, the Baringo County Conservancies Association, and really help to structure the association and also the conservancies in terms of improving their governance systems, their management systems, and this would make the area more conducive and an attractive investment area for the partners who would want to really invest in that. And the good thing right now is that you would not have to really fight to look for the partners. They are there, just the right setup needs to be put in place for Baringo. Yeah.
Thank you, Alfred. I'll just add that an important element here is building the capacity of communities and building the governance structures within that community. And the Nature Conservancy and other partners, we are collaborating to build the capacity of the regional associations. Dickson talked about 12 regional associations. They're all at different stages of development. Some are actually very, I would say, lack of a better word to use, nascent. but we are coming in with other partners to see how can we put structures in place so that donors can come in and even the government can come in and work with a structured community for benefit of nature and people. I think the second question was to Daniel, and it was around grazing. Go ahead.
No, this was about predator-proof
Yes.
bomas. And I think you're asking about how they work. The predator-proof bomas, or these are enclosures where these livestock are kept during the night. Because in this kind of the predation, the most dangerous one are the one which take place during the night, and the type of predator that is involved. We have very dangerous predators, one like a hyena, a lion, or a leopard. They are very dangerous during the night. So what happens is that these predator-proof are well-fortified bomas, very strong, by use of either post or metal poles. And then you also install a chain link wire around. So with that, because now the hyena will come through beneath under the ground, it will dig until it gets inside. So the predator-proof bomas are very much strong. Either you can put something beneath it. It can be a metal or a plain sheet of a mabati that it does not get through, even for a lion or a leopard, because the leopard will jump high, and you can have it on top of the enclosure so that the leopard cannot penetrate through it. So that is what we mean by these predator-proof bomas. And because now of the time period that also the predators have stayed with this livestock, they are also trying to develop some adaptive strategies. So even with a predator-proof bomber, it cannot be enough. And then we even now went to an extent of bringing in what they call deterrent lights. So at night, you have some lights during the dark, they blink. And then when they come near and they see the lights, maybe they can sense like someone is closer, and then they cannot attack. So that is what's happening with these predator-proof bombers, just to keep away the predators during the night, because nighttime is very dangerous. A hyena can get in, and it can clear the whole flock inside of a 300 or 400 that you have. A hyena can just clear everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Dickson, you want to add on to something?
Yeah, just to mention that Baringo is indeed one of our priority landscapes. We have an association that has an MOU with the county government, and NRT is also working there. It's one of the regions that are really biodiverse in terms of the bird life, the reptiles, the three lakes ecosystem, and really an area that needs a lot of attention, and we really prioritize and happy to work with your organization and others to see how, number one, to create these institutions, because what we've realized is that unless communities have their own democratic institutions, it's very difficult to participate in addressing some of these mega challenges. One of the things that we need to understand, particularly on carbon credit, is that the market is designed to compensate for interventions. So it's not the mere presence of trees that gives you carbon credit. You have to show evidence that you are doing action to protect those trees and to address the threats that are facing those trees. And that's why of the 4 major mega projects on carbon credit in Kenya, all of them are in conservancies, because the conservancies can demonstrate that they have a plan, they have a governance structure, they have rangers, and they are actually intervening, and that's why carbon credit becomes then a reality. And I think it's still in the early stages as we are learning today. I really like your question on loss and damage finance, and indeed most people don't really appreciate the impacts of these shocks. I recently spent some days in Marsabit, and you actually see the reality of the loss where some pastoral families that were reliant on camels were left with nothing to survive. All the camels died during the drought season. I think the story of Amboseli was told more recently, where carcasses of livestock and wildlife were spread across. And really, I think there is not adequate appreciation of the impacts of a drought when it comes. And also there is very little effort, which is an area that we need to work on in documenting these impacts, because only when we have figures and facts can we actually place on the table to claim any damage that has been caused. But again, going beyond that, your question on innovation, how then can we better use this land? Within a square kilometer of land, there is resources that you can make use of. And if you are not managing it and you don't have an institutional structure to get into partnership to attract investment, then it becomes a bit difficult to finance your own challenges. And this is really where the conservancies come in, is really creating those institutions and creating a platform where then the communities can look for tourism investors, can engage county governments, national governments, development partners, NGOs, philanthropists, to really take advantage of those natural resources and sustainably manage them while they sustain their livelihoods.
Thank you, Dickson. I think we are coming to the end of our session. I'll give Beatrice, I think there was a question on complementarity of some of the livelihoods projects we are doing very quickly, and then we'll close. Thank you.
Thank you, Munira. What I can say is there's still so much to be done, and especially on looking at the lived experiences of our people, and there's so much to be done, especially on women and youth. Every day, things are happening, but at the same time, there's a lot of opportunities with the youth to help us come up with solutions and ideas that can help us move to the next stage. At the same time, while we continue to dialogue at national and regional and global platforms, the voices of these groups must be heard, and so it's a journey that we must keep going on with. It's not the end, it's a conversation that has to continue to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice, and I think she ended it beautifully by saying it's a conversation that will continue after this. And in conclusion, I just want to thank everybody for joining us. And I just want to say that we at the Nature Conservancy, plus other partners that are working closely with communities, our goal really is to equip the communities with tools to navigate not just carbon, but any other enterprises or nature-based enterprises that communities are scooping for better livelihood. And with this, some of the things we are doing is we must make sure that there are proper social safeguards in place, like free and prior and informed consent. And KWCA is actually leading that to equip the regional associations and the conservancies. I think a lot of us who have been attending the Africa Climate Summit and the Africa Climate Week, we have seen that there's so much momentum in Africa that has never been seen before, which is really bringing together different parties and stakeholders to craft homegrown solutions which are aimed at tackling climate. And as we move and prepare to go to COP28, let the discussions continue, but not just discussions. I think we need to move from sitting around the table, going to the communities, and really developing these nature-based enterprises for community to be able to say conservation it pays more than agriculture, because we have competing land uses. So with that, thank you so much. I'll ask panelists to, maybe before, please give a round of applause to our panelists. I think they've done a great job. And then we'll just take a picture, and thank you so much. Today is the last day of the Africa Climate Week, so I wish you all well, be blessed, and safe journeys back to your homes. Thank you.
You're part of the solution. You are part of the solution.